similar type of trainings where we start really looking at innovation, and especially things that can be cross-generational. As many of you know that we talked before, students of mine, of the gap that there is in leadership. We're also going to talk about other things like mindfulness, also education. So I think it's going to be a great day. Center for Strategy and Innovation is a special project of Power Mentor, which is a mentoring program that really seeks to get people going to college and doing great things and living a purposeful life. I think we're going to have a fun day. We have a good day planned for you. It should be done by 5 or 6. Oh, I'm sorry. So, on behalf of Center for Strategy and Innovation, I want to just really thank you all. This will be the first of many similar type of trainings where we start really looking at innovation, and especially things that can be cross-generational. As many of you know that we talked before, students of mine, of the gap that there is in leadership. We're also going to talk about other things like mindfulness, also education. So I think it's going to be a great day. Center for Strategy and Innovation is a special project of Power Mentor, which is a mentoring program that really seeks to get people going to college and doing great things and living a purposeful life. In addition, another organization called SAM, Society for the Advancement of Management, and that's another organization in collaboration. And Dr. Mustafa, if you would like to come forward.
My name is Mustafa Abdul Samad. In a difficult name, I give my students recurring hours. President of Society for Advancement in Management, and also happen to be the editor-in-chief and chair of the annual conference. Hopefully you picked a copy of the journal, 2 issues in there, and have a chance to look at it. We work very closely and would like to have a good relationship with your organization. It's a great idea to have Dr. students work together to learn and improve. I did that informally when I was studying with Washington University. Now, SAM provides a lot of avenues for individuals like yourself. We have a conference where you can present a paper. You can also publish in the journal. And if you go to samnational.org, you will get all the guidelines and everything else. So I'm glad you didn't ask me to explain my name, because that takes 2 hours. And we don't have time for that. But thank you greatly for that opportunity, and hopefully I'll hear from all of you. Thank you.
And one more, Courtney and Cass, if you don't mind coming up here. I want these two just have a minute to just share. They started an organization called Women Inspiring Leaders, and it's just been going really, really well, focused on mentoring, helping people advance through not just healthcare, but many different industries. And they're going to be in the back if you would like to get involved in the organization. If you don't mind sharing, I know this wasn't planned, so hopefully you're okay with that.
Hi there, my name is Courtney, this is Cassie, and as Kevin stated, we started an organization called Women Inspiring Leaders. And we are all about inspiring and empowering women in our community to go after their goals, whether that's in leadership, education, both. We have workshops, we have networking dinners, we have a mentoring program, and we're really looking to get out there and help you achieve your goals. So stop by in the back, we have some information to hand out, and we look forward to meeting you.
I want to do one more. Just because I think it would be important. On and Chase, where are you at? You might come up here?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for agreeing to do this. These guys started an organization, and the reason I really want you to see this is because I want you to see what people are capable of when they start innovating on their own. They started an organization called CEL, and I want you to share with me about that in the next couple hours.
Yeah. So Chase and I started an organization called CEL, and it stands for Student Advocates for Language Preservation. And what we do is that we notice that there's a growing issue of language endangerment in the world. As of current, there are 7,000 languages around the world, and if nothing is done to preserve these languages, then in the next century, they're estimating that 3,500 languages will die out. And so Do you want to tell us like how we got started?
So yeah, we were formed with students from the Scripps Ranch community in some areas around San Diego. And so we got around about 18 to 20 members. And what we basically do is operate through our website, studentlanguagereservation.org. And we write articles on different languages and different issues relating to the university. And we also present to local schools with regards to raising awareness for university.
And so, yeah, one of the problems that we've been experiencing is that we need more connections. Because as high schoolers, it's very hard to get connections with universities and other organizations we work with. So if you guys know like anything or if you're really interested in helping us, then please visit our website, studentlanguagereservation.org.
These guys are in high school. We're going to be going, almost to medical school. And Chase, what were you going to do again?
International relations.
International relations, so imagine that. I also have a couple of organizations that are, they're like multi-level marketing kind of schemes. That's a joke. I just thought that'd be good. Prepaid legal and then we hear from Jennifer talk about our mind and how can we strategize? What kind of strategy do we really have to position ourselves in the best way possible to really make an impact, make a difference? So I just sent an email out to many of you asking, what are some ideas or questions you want to talk about, and I have some of those which I'm going to incorporate in. But also, you can text me while I'm talking if you want and say, send me an ask you or anything, just say, like, we can cover this, or what about this, what about that. I find that it's easy because I just glance down and incorporate it right into what we're talking about. Because some of the things we're going to talk about is, how do you deal with this, how do you deal with that. One of the big issues that most people were asking me about is generational challenges in the workplace, specifically Gen Y and Gen X, and feeling like that the baby boomers just don't quite allow them to grow, allow them the autonomy to do things, all those kind of things. So that's one piece of it. And the other piece of it is, how do you influence other people? And how do you become a leader? And I would look at, like, for example, Chase and I saw the looks on your face when they said high school. And you're like, whoa, how does someone just all of a sudden say, hey, let's get together and let's start preserving some languages that we're seeing some issues with? How does that happen? What do they do? How are they collaborating? How are they coming together? And all these things, these three subjects tie in. They're so different: education, right? Mindfulness, and now leadership. How does this stuff tie in? So that's what we're going to talk about for the next couple hours, 3 or 4 hours, my God. As a joke, that's good. And as soon as I'm done, we're going to have a panel, and then Mike and Jennifer are going to come up, and then we're going to actually just fill some questions, and we'll put the wireless mic out there. We'll pass that around, and then we'll answer any questions that you may have. So, starting up with, vertical leadership. What is vertical leadership? And leadership is changing a lot, and one of the problems is you have a lot of people in the workplace that want leadership to be today what it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. Now, there are some principles that will never change, primarily ethical type things. Things like that, they can't change. And sometimes people think that should change, but it can't. You get yourself in trouble, and we see that. We see in organizations, how is it that leaders are able to have, members of their board, members of their council indicted because they all allowed each other to go down the wrong path? How is it that not one person said, hey, I'm not sure we should be doing this? And that's part of leadership. So first question I do want to ask all of you is, I want you to just raise your hand and tell me, what do you think is a stronger component of leadership? Power or influence? So if you think it's power, raise your hand. Raise your hand. Okay, if you think it's influence. Okay, that's awesome. Now I've asked that question before, and usually I get a very different response. Usually I get about 30% that say power and the rest say influence. And it was interesting, Courtney and I had lunch with a CEO of a hospital here in San Diego, and this lady is just amazing. She's a baby boomer, but totally connected with Gen X, Gen Y, totally gets it, sees all these things. And one of the things that she said was really interesting, is she said, I think baby boomers operate out of fear in one sense, and I also think that baby boomers like power. Which I thought was really interesting when she said that. I don't know, did that surprise you, Courtney, when she said that? I kind of was a little surprised. It was coming from a baby boomer. And she was sharing about the struggles that she sees with the generational gaps, because what's happening is, in a few years when these baby boomers start retiring, a lot of Gen X and Gen Yers are going to have a huge gap, because there wasn't good succession planning, and because they kept knowledge from them, and so they're going to have this gap of being able to actually continue on in this organization. And interestingly, baby boomers usually talk a lot about they want a good legacy. And really the only sustainable way to have a good legacy is to what? Develop the people around you that can carry those things on. So when we talk about vertical leadership, this is something that is what the leaders of the 21st century really would be required to have. One is the transformation of how leaders think. If you remember, how many when you were young, your parents told you things like, don't do this or don't do that, and you said, why? And they said, because I'm your mom and I said so. Did you ever experience that? Anybody? Okay. Now, when you really look at this, that only works usually for a kid when they're in the presence then of that parent. Okay, so when I'm around mom, if she says it, I'm not going to do it because she said so. However, if it were to be explained and they said, the reason that I don't want you to do this is because of this, this, and this, it becomes sustainable, and now I go, oh, okay. She connected the dots for me, now I understand this, and now in the absence of them, I'm going to carry on and make sure that I'm careful of this. And the same thing goes with the workplace. A while back I asked some leaders in healthcare, which did they think was more concerning? Employees' behavior in their presence or outside of their presence? How many of you say in the presence of the leader is more concerning someone's behavior in the presence of the leader? Anyone? Outside of the presence of the leader. Exactly why? The same reason for the parent. And they kind of couldn't connect it until I started talking about what about with your kids? Are you more concerned with their behavior in your presence or outside of your presence? Outside of your presence. So when we start talking about leadership, we have to start seeing things very differently than we ever did. As soon as we catch ourselves saying, yeah, but I've always done this and I've always done that, that gives you a clue that you're going to be very disconnected. So how do we think, how do we feel, how do we make sense of the world? And I really like what Jennifer had to say with mindfulness, because that really becomes that foundational, with all the material she was talking about, and with mindfulness, how we see the world, how we interact with the world. This is all tied into leadership, and what strategy do we have we can make an impact. I'm assuming that everyone in this room has a strong desire to impact the world around them. Is there anyone that does not? Most people do. What I hear from most people is, I want so bad to do this, but I feel like I keep running up against roadblocks, mostly in the workplace. A lot of roadblocks. So all this innovation, right? And there's a roadblock. Now there's one company that's really good, they can't afford to have that kind of a roadblock, and that's Google, right? Google has to be innovative because that's the dollars and cents. Google has to do everything they can to develop an innovative workforce. There's a lot of best practices you can look at from Google. So, some of the things that Google does, for example, is they're not really into employee opinion surveys. Why? Because what do we do with employee opinion surveys often? We craft the questions so we can solicit a good response, so you can tell everybody we are rated as the top 50th place or whatever within the 70 places to work. Google says we don't have to ask that, we already know. We already know the best place. Why? Because the number of applicants they get, but they also do sensing, and we'll talk about that here, but they do sensing, where they really get an idea of what their employees are really thinking, and they respond, they're responsive to the trends that they're seeing to help them be innovative. So it makes sense to the world, including the development of mental complexity, perfect up with the mindfulness, and then emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is critical because oftentimes we don't know how we carry ourselves. We may not recognize how other people are being perceived. So for example, if I right now I'm continuing to talk and you all start leaving, then I have to say, I can't get mad and say I can't believe how rude the audience was. I have to say I'm disappointed in myself that I did not engage them well to be able to continue these conversations. So when Mike talked about education, for example, if you're really a teacher, I remember I sat on the school board years ago, and the mission statement was, all students will come to school ready to learn. But it really should be, all teachers will motivate and inspire students to want to learn. Right? This whole AD, what was it called? AD what? ADHD, I'm not really familiar with that. That's kind of a joke, maybe that knows me, because I have a little higher energy. But anyway, in my mind, all over the place. I can hardly close my eyes to be honest. That's, you know, she's like to steady on my mind. Anyway, so when you look at this emotional intelligence, there's a gap that I see in the workplace, for example, sometimes generationally, where there's this mindset of, I don't really care how the younger generation feels about this or that, because they're going to do things the way I say, or they do in front of a job. And those are the organizations that are going to have major failure, they're going to set themselves up for failure. Same with education. If you want to have an innovative school, all the things that Mike talked about is what you have to do. Because people want value in their education. Exactly like you said, it's not just the diploma, that's not going to get it for you. That's helpful. It's got to be, what are you doing to make some changes and be really, be able to really develop yourself. So emotional intelligence, how do we get emotional intelligence? Hopefully we get it from our parents during parenting, but sometimes we don't. But critical thinking, the ability to do things like simulations, and one of the things that we're going to start doing a lot of with Center for Strategy and Innovation is look at doing simulations, complex issues, and get groups together like a think tank, and really try to look at these complex issues. And if you apply these particular strategies, what would the likely outcome be? Those kind of things. And to really hone our minds in, to really look at solving problems, making a difference in the world. Thought-based education, emotional guidance, mentoring, coaching, job experience, obviously. Life experience is huge. Self-study. Interesting with life experience. I hear people a lot of times and they say, I just don't have a lot of experiences in my life. Then create them. You have to create them. And I give you a perfect example. I had a student call me up and said, hey, I have a brother that's awesome, sitting right over here. Andrew said, this guy's awesome, you gotta meet with him. We ended up meeting, talking, collaborating. Amazing ideas come forward. We're gonna go up to Google and spend the day on February 13th? I think February 13th. Where are these, you create them. You can never give up opportunity if you want to be a leader in your life. Every time you see an opportunity, you got to jump on it. There's also times you have to run away from opportunities because some opportunities may not be particularly good for you. So you have to understand, look and say, what's the outcome? You know, if I spend energy or time on this, is the likely outcome going to be something that I'm going to have a return on my investment or no? And that's something that would be critical in my ability to make a decision if I'm going to do that or not. So talking about motivation. How do we motivate ourselves? And how do we look at motivating ourselves to rise up and try to say, I want to develop myself, be effective, deploy all the things that we're talking about? How do you motivate yourself? So a really good book by Daniel Pink called Drive. Everybody's got a chance to read it. He did some research and he was really, really well done. Talked about three key things: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. That's simple. That's why in the workplace, especially, and this is especially true with Gen Y and Gen X, but even for baby boomers, just in a little different way. This is why the Gen Y and the Gen Xers feel oftentimes micromanaged in the workplace. Because this word autonomy has very significant meaning. Autonomy meaning, I want to direct my life. I want to direct what I want to do. I would like you to tell me, Kevin, we need this as an end result. Can you accomplish this? Yes. All right, go do it. And let me collaborate with the group and go find out how to do this. And if I don't accomplish it, then fire me. Or mark me down that I didn't accomplish this particular goal, maybe I will another one. But give that to me. The problem is, oftentimes what we see is, we want you to go do this, this is what we want you to accomplish, and here's how you're going to do it. And then this big, long, drawn-out, micromanaged plan, here's how you're going to have to do it. And it's because that person, in their mind, thinks that they are the only one that can really make sure that this happens. By doing that, what? It totally disengages the person. So when we talk about engagement, part of that engagement is allow people to have a stake in it, have skin in the game. Mastery. People want to get better. I mean, think about it. How many of you woke up, be honest, how many of you woke up this morning and kind of contemplated, I'm not sure if I'm going to go to this thing? Be honest, raise your hand. I wasn't going to come. But, you know, there's times that we contemplate something, right? If something comes up and you go, you know what, and then we rip ourselves off, okay? When you look at the different organizations, people pulling together, you know, women inspiring leaders, you have to jump on these things. Now, to a good example, Courtney and Cassie had all these people, oh, let's all do it. And guess who did all the work? Out of all the people, 2. As a leader, you have to realize you're going to log alone often. And that's okay. That's okay. But this master is really want to get better. And purpose, what's the purpose? What's the meaning for the existence of your life? You have to ask yourself that. Because if you have no purpose, your life will not be sustainable. It's going to be very difficult. What is the reason for your existence? So for example, for me, ADHD, that was the story of my life, right? So for me, I'm very passionate about, I was the special ed kid. I was the one that said would be working in fast food restaurants. That would never be able to go to college. It was not college material. So my passion is to do for others what I wish would have happened to me. Because what I was having happen was teachers talking to my mom in my presence saying, Kevin has special needs. Kevin should gain all these little things. And I'm thinking, like, I'm right here listening to this. I want someone to tell me, actually, no, Kevin, you can do it. You can make it. We're with you. We believe in you. Focusing on what's right instead of what's wrong. And purpose can do all sorts of things. Because everyone in this room has something that you have that others don't. And how can you put that together and start using that, which also drives you? So, challenge versus opportunities is generations. How many of you, raise your hand, experience issues that you would attribute to generational gaps in the workplace? Raise your hand. Okay? Now, I speak a lot on Gen Y to Gen Yers, and I speak to baby boomers, Gen X. We get along with everybody, we just get forgotten. We're there, but we don't have, we're kind of able to bridge the gap between Y and baby boomers. But when I talk to baby boomers, they do bring up legitimate issues from Gen Y that Gen Y miss, that if they can kind of tweak it a little bit, they can help bridge that gap between themselves and baby boomers. Likewise, baby boomers have to understand some things as well, that they're not maximizing the potential of Gen Y. One of the greatest things with Gen Y, I think Mike talked more about it, purposeful. Gen Yers will take a pay cut in order to have autonomy. They're not necessarily into the money. They want to have a meaningful purpose. Like they want to know that they're making a difference. You can't buy that kind of stuff. And you can hone in on that, develop them, and pay them well for what they're doing. Imagine that. So there's a little video that's cute. It's only like an hour and a half. It's very short. I saw this because they've shown this in different classes. Because you have to understand, many organizations see this as one of their greatest dilemmas right now is this generational issue. And so this is a cute little
Hi, I'm a baby boomer.
And I'm Generation Y.
I like to show dedication to my employer by working really long hours.
I don't really feel like I need to work long hours as long as I get my work done.
I'm excited when my workday starts.
I'm excited when my workday ends.
I like to have meetings in person.
I prefer email or voicemail.
I've worked hard to climb the corporate ladder.
I should already be at the top of the ladder. I mean, I have a degree.
I put in 60 hours at the office last week.
I'm taking next month off to go hiking in Malaysia.
I have a sense of entitlement.
Oh, so do I.
Hey, I like Maxwell House.
Oh, I prefer Starbucks.
I just got a Facebook account.
Oh, Facebook, good for you. That is so 2009.
I like competition.
I prefer collaboration.
I've heard of that.
Oh, and he doesn't know this, but I plan on getting his job when he retires.
She doesn't know this, but I'm never going to retire. Now, come on, we really need to work at getting along.
See, there you go with work again.
That's what I'm saying. You have no work ethic.
Well, that's because to you, working a half day means you leave at 5. You know what, you're right, we do need to try to get along.
That's what I think.
Okay, well, why don't we focus on what we admire about each other?
Great.
Well, if you think about it, your generation invented a lot of the technology we use.
Yes, but for you it just seems to come so easily.
Well, only because we're practically playing video games in our cribs.
Yes, that's true. You did have a different upbringing, though. My parents are still married to each other. Yes, self-esteem, we thought that was very important, so we tried to pump your generation full of it, which is why for everything you got a participation ribbon.
You know, we can use a little more of that here at work. I mean, does anybody ever say, hey, thanks for coming to work on time, good job getting your work done? No, it's just like it's expected or something.
It is by those of us with a work ethic.
There you go again.
Hi, I'm a baby boomer.
And I'm Generation Y.
And we're Generation X, and we're stuck in the middle of all of this.
It's really, really comical and true. But it's fun. And I have found that if you can have a sense of humor with generation differences, it's helpful. But how do you handle it when you are in an organization that you just feel like you're almost being set up for failure? How do you navigate through that? And that's the majority of the questions that I have coming in from people. And how do you do that? And it is an interesting question because there's a lot of strategies you can use, but you also have to realize that you also may be in the wrong place. it may be that that's not an organization that's going to help grow you, that it's actually going to stifle you, and that you may want to look at even moving away from that, which we'll talk about. So, how do we accelerate this learning? We have to first start with understanding ourselves, right? Understanding not so much in what, but how do we know things? How are we learning things? You know, when Mike was talking, I saw people like really wanting to get like these apps. And to be honest, I was downloading on my phone as he was talking. You know, we want to learn. We just want all this information. We also have to understand, you know, why are we using it? How are we going to use it? What's the return we're going to get out of it? When we lead through complex changes, it can be very, very challenging. Why? Why are complex changes so hard? Because we don't particularly know the outcome. And that part of it is very challenging for us. So, with effective leadership, there's a couple studies that have been done that I thought were pretty interesting, and it really tells the state of leadership within organizations. And one is that this study, this is DEI in 2014, so it's very current. Only 25% of organizations feel that they have high-quality leaders. It's a fourth. And then 34% of people felt they had effective bosses. This is according to the employees. And that's really scary. When you delve into the study, it talks about how the boss isn't trying to help you grow. The boss isn't trying to develop you. My boss feels threatened by me. All those kind of things that sometimes we all feel and we deal with. Active engagement. I was talking about this engagement. Another study, according to Gallup, again recent, 13% of the workforce is estimated to be engaged. I mean, that's pretty scary. 63% not engaged, and then you got 24% actively disengaged, meaning they're the ones talking trash, telling everybody this is stupid, your mission's down, I don't care about this place, I just want to get my check and leave, and on and on and on and on and on. So we have to ask ourselves first, what camp are we in? So I have a couple of choices. So for example, I'm in an organization that's challenging, I'm trying to develop my leadership. If I'm in the organization and I'm being valued in the organization and I'm not supporting whatever the mission is for that organization, I'm not only hurting the organization, I'm hurting myself. And I have to make a decision. I have to say maybe I can't be there. Because it actually is critical, especially Gen Y. It's very critical for you to be in an organization that you believe your purpose is actually anchored within that organization. Because that's everything. That means a whole lot. So I just caution you on understanding that, because the tendency for all of us is to kind of start, kind of getting a distorted view of the organization, when it may not be the organization, and maybe some of the leaders that maybe are not effective in their leadership abilities. So, 2014 Korn Ferry reported that the average company will be left with just a half of their talent it needs by 2015. This gap is going to start occurring more and more and more for organizations who realize that they are going to really have a shortage of the talent that they need to stay competitive. And that's where you come in saying, I want to be the strategic leader. So just pretend for a minute that you are the organization. Pretend you have your own organization and you have people working for you. The reality is that people you're going to pay attention to are the people that are what? Benefiting your organization. Right? One of the downsides is when the guy talks jokingly about self-esteem with Gen Y, one of the challenges with Gen Y is there is a propensity to want something for nothing at times. And the reason that comes from is it comes from a lot of the self-esteem issue in school, where you draw a squiggly line and they go, oh my God, that is magnificent, that's incredible, just a line. And the person's like, really? They just drew a line and they're taking all that? I don't have to do anything, right? So you have to really shake it off and say, you have to actually be an asset to the organization that you work. As a leader, I hear people all the time, they say, I want to be a leader, I want to be a leader, and then I ask them, how many people are you leading in your personal life? How many people are you mentoring? None. Then you're not a leader. Leader isn't something you just step into one day and say, I'm going to be a leader today. Leader is your presence, who you are in your presence. Do people look up to you? And the only way they're going to look up to you is if they see that you're helping develop them and that you believe in them more than they believe in themselves. And that's the very thing that bosses have to learn to do. They have to start finding out, especially baby boomers, what's going right instead of always what's going wrong. Those kind of things. So how do you do that? If you're in an organization and you have a boss that doesn't seem to be doing that, how do you do that? Can you manage up? You can, I think you can. I think you can try to manage up, but it's gonna take a long time. You know, I've had people say, my parents this or that, and they need to know this, they need to know that. And I say, do you really believe they're going to change? After all these years, they're now in their 70s and 80s. Probably not, right? Just like everybody. You can't just change overnight. But part of it is, can you see your boss differently? Studies actually have shown that Gen Y actually look up to baby boomers a lot, and that's why they get let down a lot. They actually see them almost like grandparents. They really look up to them, and they want so badly to be mentored by them, but then the baby boomer, it's hard for them to relate because they're seeing it as, what does this person want from me? Why are they trying to get close to me? They want a job. They want all those different things that go through their minds. Right? So, 86% of companies with strategic leadership development programs are able to respond to changes in business environments compared to 52% who are not. So what does it mean to be strategic? How do you define strategic? So they're strategic in the classroom. We might talk about the APA Nazi, and I know there are students in here going, I don't get it, right? Yeah, I know, I saw you guys looking at each other, and you're like, where is he? That's what he's doing. But there is a time that you have to kind of get to know your teacher, and can students manage a teacher up in the classroom? You ready? What do you say? Raise your hand if you think you can manage up a teacher and help change a teacher's behavior in the classroom. Yes? Only a few. Now, something happened years ago. This friend of mine, I subbed for him at San Diego State, and the class was telling me that this particular professor, like, he walks back and forth, like, from one end of the lecture hall to the other. He's always walking back and forth. And that he's always telling them how he can never change him. No one's capable of influencing him. And so we played a little trick, and I told them, you know, do you think you can influence him? Because they were telling me that the guy was not a great teacher, that he puts him to sleep, he's not engaging. His mentality was, you're odd to be in my presence, so just be thankful that you actually get to sit in this room while I lecture. So the game that they played, I told them, was whenever he wanders towards the right side of the room, start getting, every one of you start getting a puzzled look on your face, you know, like you're confused. A couple of you that are bold enough, raise your hand, I don't really understand. And as soon as you go to the left side, be nodding your head, affirming everything that he's saying, totally engaged, totally interested. And I guarantee you, you will find this guy that he says wanders back and forth, he will gravitate to see on that left side of the room. And that's exactly what happened. You can impact and influence behavior. So with teachers, for example, if you ask the right questions to teachers, you can trigger things and engage them. Because oftentimes teachers are walking into a classroom, especially if they've been out of the workforce for a while, they may be thinking they don't have a whole lot to offer now, especially when all the latest and greatest things you're talking about, they're like, oh, I'm like Mike's apps. I mean, I thought I was into apps, and I'm like, I've never heard half of those. You know, some people get a little bit afraid of that. Same thing with the boss. How can you engage the boss? So I'll just tell you some tips and tricks, like for me, that I'm trying to do to navigate through that. And the first thing is trying to really understand what is my boss's goals. What is their purpose in the organization? What are they trying to accomplish? And then I have to say, I have to help them accomplish those goals. End of story. Because they hired me. You ever hear that saying, you don't bite the hand that feeds you? If you really look principally, that really is an issue. Unless they want you to do something ethically, illegal, unethical, something like that. Or I have to make a decision and say, I can't work under this, maybe I have to go somewhere else. Now, how can I impact them? I can start collaborating with them, and instead of saying, like, I want to do this, I can ask and say things like, I wonder if this were to happen, I wonder maybe if it could help this or it could help that. And you have to try little things and see what works, and what works you do more of, what doesn't work you do less of. Right? When we talk about mindfulness with Jennifer, this is a perfect strategy when you're trying to be mindful, trying to hone in and focus on things. It's really critical to be intuitive of what reactions you get when you're trying to employ particular strategies in the workplace or anywhere for that matter. Does that make sense? Competencies. What kind of competencies do you think teachers is going to require? And this is based on research. They say effective leaders in the future must be highly strategic thinkers, now more than ever. It is so complicated in the workforce. So complicated. It doesn't matter what industry you're in. I always think, because I'm in healthcare, I go, oh, healthcare's so complex, and then I talk to people in education and go, oh, I didn't know you guys were dealing with that. Oh, okay. And I talk to people in other industries and theater, and it's everywhere. It really is. Able to focus on complex problems and opportunities. Then the real issue is, can you actually resolve and solve problems in the workplace? That's where you become an asset, right? If you're mentoring people, what's your whole thing? You're trying to help people grow, which is solving a problem that they have and that they don't want to do where they're at. They want to grow and become better, whatever. But those things you can measure by. Superb and inspiring communicator with excellent people skills, risk-oriented, and deeply collaborative. Being able to have that collaboration, and what does that mean? When you're talking collaboration, you have to stop saying, this is who I am, this is how I am. Yeah, that's how you used to always be. Well, this is just how I am, take it or leave it. All right? You teachers may say that. Well, that's just how I teach. You really have to say, it's irrelevant how I think I am. The real issue is how I'm being perceived. Is it effective? Right? A teacher in the classroom, how do they know they're effective? Is it just they give you grades? Evals, they think that, but some students will just not do the eval. Or when they do the eval, it's kind of, hit or miss. I mean, you can use evals.
Engage students.
Students, are the students engaged? Do the students, I'll tell you that the true measure, in my opinion, of a teacher is, do students feel comfortable asking you really critical questions and asking you to help them critically think through things, like in the workplace, those kind of things. That gives you an example that there's a pretty good collaborative partnership there. If that's not happening, then you're merely going in and lecturing or whatever you're doing, but you're not connecting with them. Because education is not just about the material, it's about changing people's lives. It's about seeing people do great things in their life that they dreamed of, and you're going to be a little piece of that puzzle to help them get there. So this is kind of a neat little model here. Connecting strategy, goals, meaningful purpose, discovering better ways of working, constantly always analyzing yourself. Delivering value and efficiency to the customer, enabling people to lead and contribute to their fullest potential. These really are just so solid, but yet we forget about these things. We forget that these are so critical. So for example, what I've done today, I'm going to be mindful and thinking, how do these go today? What could have been better? What about this? What about that? Always debriefing, right? In the workplace, you have a challenging situation with someone, we oftentimes will attribute it, the challenge was with them, not us. As opposed to me saying, I wonder if I could have done something differently, could it be as affected this differently? Right? All of those kind of things. I'm really looking deep inside, what could I have done differently? Because I can't change anyone else. I really only truly can affect myself. There's nothing I can do for anybody else. The goal. Develop future leaders, one person at a time. And our goal with Center for Strategy and Innovation is very simple. Capable of breaking through barriers, all the barriers that you see, some of them are generational. Cultivating high impact innovation. And what does that really mean? What does it mean to be innovative? And you heard stories of that with different people here today. The things that Mike was talking about, which I can tell you, there's so many classrooms that I know for a fact those kind of things are not happening, and they should be. It should be everywhere. It should be the standard. Building high trust relationships. How do we build high trust relationships even with people that we don't think understand us? If we can't develop a strong relationship with our boss, we're in trouble. Because again, they saw something in you, brought you in, and now it's your job to try to collaborate, try to develop that. And again, if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work. And instead of doing damage, you're better off finding something that's a better fit. Acting with deep courage. Now, what does that really mean, deep courage? As a leader, you have to be courageous. And sometimes you have to say things that people may not want to hear. And sometimes that's part of the problem is we say things and we just tell people things that they want to hear. Oftentimes I'll encounter people and I'll share with them. They'll ask me, tell me what you think of the way I'm doing this or that. And I always ask them first, are you sure you want me to tell you? And they say yes, because it may not be something you want to hear. No, I want to hear it. And I say, what the impression is this or this or this, and I wonder if you did this, if that might mitigate that. You'd be surprised how many people say, never heard that before. I remember before I was at Sharp, when I was at Scripps, they put a manager working for me was a challenging person. And they're telling me every time how bad this person is, and I pulled the performance evaluations for 4 years. I said, no, this person's awesome. What are you talking about? Because all the performance evaluations were incredible. Because no one wanted to deal with the aftermath of being critical. But the problem with that is how can you expect someone to change if you're not telling them the truth? Right? And then after you tell her the truth, she ended up becoming very high performing. So that's a critical thing, have that deep courage. Ability to transform organizations, ability to transform yourself. And an organization's approach that I think is very, very effective for all of our leaders, model the behavior you want to see. That's as simple as that. If you want things from others, you got to model it. Connect with people, right? You have to have an interaction. You have to build that connection with people, and you have to involve them in things, which means what? Autonomy, right? And that's the engagement model that we believe is very, very effective. And for an individual approach, formal education, that's huge, right? But you also have to make sure you select education where you're growing, where you're not just going there and saying, I hope they let me out early today so that I can just leave. You have to say, are we engaging in things that I walk out of here and think differently, or I see things differently? Effective mentoring. If you don't have a mentor, you should try to find a mentor. You should also be mentoring others. You'd be surprised how much you will grow from mentoring others. By teaching others, you teach yourself. Then experiential, and then being introspective. All the things that we're talking about today. Mindfulness, seeking out different methodologies that the teaching like Mike talked about. So, experiential, they shape our thoughts, ideas, and I love this quote here: leadership is about making others better as a result of our presence, and making sure that impact lasts in our absence. That, to me, is the end measure of really, if you're a leader, then you will be able to see that. So with that, I'm going to invite Mike, Jeff to come up, and we can do the panel, and I'm going to send the microphone. So anybody have questions? Yeah, I'm going to real fast, I'm going to take some of that real fast in the presentation. Okay. How do you lead employees that do not respect you? I would say instead of trying to find out how to do that, you have to ask yourself why they don't respect you. For me, that's the bigger issue is why are they not respecting you? What you have to say is if one person doesn't respect you, it may just be them. If 2 people don't respect you, if 3 people don't respect you, you have to realize it's you. And so you have to go, I have to make a change. Anything to add, of course, on that question? Most effective style in healthcare, situational leadership. What do you think about situational leadership? It's a style of leadership. Anybody? Any comments on that?
I think when you look at things like situational leadership, it kind of ties back into what Kevin was kind of presenting there at the end of his presentation with those individuals that have a high level of emotional intelligence. The ability to react and respond to the audience in which you are working with. Those leaders, we don't typically refer to the employees or the individuals that report up to us as an audience, but they really are the audience. We look at things like marketing, right? We can't just market to everybody. We have to market to the target audience, right? That's what they refer to. And who is that ideal client? Well, you want ideal performing employees. You want to be able to respond to them and to coach and guide them in the direction that you need them to move, but you have to understand them first. You can't just always be disseminating information down. So when you look at the opportunity for you to be more of the situational leadership, you have to be fluid and flexible to adapt to the audience and what the circumstances are in that particular situation.
I think it's probably more of the same, but to continue on with my broken record, pay attention. Like, if you're paying attention to where you are and what you're doing, but also pay attention to who's around you. Just to like bring the psychology into it. People usually behave in a certain way for a certain reason. So if you're noticing behavior in your employees, ask yourself, why is that happening? Ask them why it's happening. So I think engaging, Michael talked about engaging learners, but you can engage your staff and employees in similar ways and bring in some compassion pay attention to what they're saying, what's the message?
The question was leadership, if President, let's do this real quick. Leadership in the first 90 days, what's your recommendation? And, you know, it's funny because in an organization, most people see the first 90 days as the honeymoon, and you're wondering what's going to happen with this person when their true self comes out, right? Because oftentimes you get someone in your interviews and they say, oh, I'm totally free weekends, oh yeah, night, whatever you need me, and then after a few weeks they say, oh, actually, yeah, I cannot work weekends. Yeah, sorry, but oh, I'm also taking a vacation. And all those things come up. So I would tell you that your first 90 days is going to really do a lot for you if you make it work for you, of really growing and being mindful and really paying attention to emotional intelligence and growing and using that as a time to build solid relationships for the right reasons. Any thoughts that you guys have on those first 90 days?
That's a great question, whoever asked that question, because usually in the first 90 days is when you really truly establish yourself as a leader, right? Because in most cases, you're going to be taking on a new team or a new set of employees that maybe don't have a great deal of familiarity with you, and they're going to test you, right? They want to challenge you a little bit because they want to see if you can really back up the game that you talk, or the game that whoever promoted you to that position talked about you. Right? So set clear expectations up front. And you can do that in an influential way, right? We think back to Kevin's presentation on power versus influence, right? You can be influential in that leadership role without being too overbearing or too commanding in that. Set clear expectations, hold those employees accountable for delivering what they told you they're able to deliver, and then reward them as a result of doing that. And you're going to really be able to establish a strong loyalty and following amongst those employees.
The question.
Yeah, maybe this was discussed while I was away. I had to step out for about an hour, but let's take the situation of the classroom. And let's take from the faculty's perspective or the teacher's perspective. And let's assume that the student body is multi-generational. You have students from all the different generations. The quote old, like Michael Beavis is, to very young, like I am. And you have to manage somehow that multi-generational student body in a way that everyone learns, or most people learn. What's your suggestion from the faculty perspective? How do I manage that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That's actually what kind of started me down the path that I was on with doing some of the research that I did. Because as you know, Tony, a lot of the students that we end up teaching are across a very wide array of generations. You saw some of the videos and some of the differences there, and it's hard to keep everybody engaged in the same process, in the same learning model. It's the same in corporate society, and that's actually why we try to roll up everything today on more of a broad level, but some of the questions that you're asking really needs to be kind of developed a little further and have a much more extensive conversation on that specific topic beyond what we can cover here. But bottom line is that what it really comes down to is that engagement piece, right? And so if you kind of combine the concept that we talked about with engagement and the concept of this emotional intelligence, which is a whole other channel that we didn't get to really dive into today. And I'm now looking at certain things like how experiential learning actually helps boost emotional intelligence scores, not just in students, but in executive leaders themselves. And so that's where some of my doctoral dissertation research is and things like that. And then you couple in Dr. Medina's approach to the mindfulness concept so that you can be fully aware of what your role is in that responsibility and how you can engage each of those individuals differently to accomplish the same task. So right before I came here to this, I was having a fantastic conversation with a two-star general, and I asked him point blank, I said, what's the difference between leadership in the military and leadership in corporate America? Because you've held high-level, C-level type positions in corporate America since you've been retired from the military. What's the difference? And he said to me, he said, well, in corporate America, he says, the knives are a lot sharper because the stakes are so much smaller. And what he was trying to get across to me was that in the military, obviously the stakes are very high. right? Because if you don't effectively lead people, people could lose their lives, right? In corporate America, he says, fortunately, people don't typically lose their lives based on decisions that you make, but you have to make these decisions with a great amount of care, because they can kind of spin out of control on you if you don't pay attention to the stakes. And so, again, it kind of breaks it down into being able to identify the uniqueness of all the individuals that make up your team, and how do you motivate them and drive them towards one common goal. And I think it ties back into the classroom, and that's where, again, just from a personal experience standpoint, where I've seen great success. And actually, it's funny that I presented on a bunch of this technology and apps, and the interesting thing is that the people that tend to embrace it more are the older generations in the classroom, because it's new, it's very new and fresh and unique to them. Whereas the younger population is saying, oh, cool apps, I know apps. This app isn't really that exciting compared to my app that I use for my personal things, but they understand the concept, so the learning curve is steep.
Okay, so you brought up another variable now. You brought in the military. And now we've got the multi-generational, and we have people coming back from Iraq and other places who have a difficult time transitioning to civilian life. And so now we're compounded with some emotional issues. And the fact the member isn't necessarily trained to deal with those issues that come to bear in class. Any suggestions? Obviously, I'm begging for some hints here, because I face these things as a faculty member.
I just wanted to tell him what Jennifer Medina's hourly rate is.
It hurt me now.
I want to address first on the first question. What crosses all generations is engaging people and getting to know what they're trying to do in their life. So when you engage students, when you can get emails from your students saying, I'm trying to accomplish this, but here's a barrier I'm getting, that's why it's the true mark, because that crosses anything as far as engagement. When you have that where students know, no matter what, I can get some answers. As far as military, it's interesting, I want to make fun here real quick, Kelvin, I'm going to put you on the spot like everybody else. So we've been talking about this. Scouts retired from the military, and he's focused on looking at that, how do you help people transition, especially from PTSD and all those kind of things. Can I shed a little bit of light on that?
Sure, I think you have a very important point. I think one of the things that we can see is that 30 years in the Navy. One of the things you need to look at when people retire, either separate from the military, is basically what we heard. Not only that number, but the families. I think one of the big things we do in the military, we don't really prepare military members. That whole adage of plan to fail to plan. We don't really think about that in the military. I can say, being a leader, my job was basically to make sure I got people out doing the job, doing the mission, make sure they're prepared. I really think about these people coming back separated. That's a big issue for us in the military right now and society. I think sitting down, make sure we meet their needs, not only that service member, but their families. That's a very important point that we miss a lot in the military. We don't sit down with those family members to see where they are and just see what level they are. The military does a great job of training them to go do the mission for the government. We don't prepare them for that day after the military. That's what we feel right there. So I think we're still trying to find ways to bridge that gap. But once we work on that, that's what I think pay dividends there.
And I think one of the things is like workshops, for example. Like Jeremiah right here actually just left the military, and Calvin are both going to kind of collaborate. And I encourage anyone in institutions, education, maybe with them before you leave, because they can do it, that great thing, and actually coming in and presenting and having, helping plan workshops for the military people. I've done workshops on helping them transition into the civilian workforce, because that's a challenge, a whole other challenge. Leadership in the military is so very different that oftentimes leaders get set for failure from the military when going to that civilian branch is very, very different. So anyways, thanks for coming up here, and I encourage you guys to
Kevin, I just want to bring up one quick thing, because I think as we talk about broad education, one of the things that we did by setting up the International Doctoral Mentoring Program, Empowerment Program, is the importance of mentorship, because I think one of the things that everybody forgets about is that probably many, many years ago, the University of Phoenix, when they came up with the teams that either people like or they don't like, there's no in between, is that that's a form of leadership, that's a form of empowerment, that is a form of mentoring, not just each other, but that professor that's there is mentoring. It's all about mentoring. So and this is kind of basically for all three of you, is we've gone into 2015 now. So we're in the education where doctoral degrees are online. It's all on the computer. We're using that technology. But where are we missing that connection of that physical face-to-face mentorship?
So I would say, I have just as much effective mentoring via electronic, via email, via text messaging. I actually use that a lot just because it's too hard, especially one-on-one mentoring is very, very challenging. Face-to-face, I even got to group type of mentoring because of this challenging against finding out people that actually want to mentor. But I've had some of the most meaningful conversations, especially with military guys that were deployed, through text messages. Through chatting with them and then just typing, and oftentimes can say things that they would be hard for them to say face to face. On the other hand, when they come back, there's times that there's some really great times of face to face. So I think it just depends. Just the other day, Andrew and I were texting back and forth, and there were very profound things that were going back and forth. They were meaningful. And when you talk about mindfulness, for me, when I mentor people, I'm not really mentoring them, they're mentoring me. And I have to see it that way, because I'm actually learning from them. And I'm also reinforcing anything that I may be trying to teach them. I'm actually reinforcing it for myself, like, yeah, Kevin, don't forget that. So my point of that is, I think face-to-face is important, per se. And I know it's a gap in the workplace, because everyone's saying, we're on our phones, texting, on. So there is a means of definitely having face-to-face communication. But I think there's also a difference in mentoring to help someone move their life and someone to learn to have people skills and to be able to communicate effectively. Do I add to that?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because, again, that's where the trend is. Now, look at things like business as an example. Forrester just put out their annual report back in December on the increase of marketing spend that organizations are going to have to reach their customers. And they're going to increase their marketing spend in one particular area, and it's mobile, right? It's because everybody is out there on their digital devices, and you have to be able to go out and find your customers where they are. You have to meet them where they are. The old age of bringing them into the retail location isn't working, right? You saw the augmented reality video that I showed there. That's how people are going through their process. So we look at it from the standpoint of education, and the same kind of thing. You think, okay, well, now we're in this digital space. We lose that face-to-face interaction with individuals, because that's really where the meaning and the connection is, right? But not so much if those individuals are actually more connected and more comfortable in their digital environment. So I know Darren up here is making a transition in an educational field and developing podcast type technology that gets integrated into the curriculum, because that way the students can constantly have opportunities in various channels in order for them to reach the content in different ways. There's probably not very many people in this room that know more about mentoring than Kevin. But the research is very strong on what mentorship does for you. And as an educator and as an employer, I don't really care as much about the degree that you have. Yeah, I said that right. So it's not so much that you have this fancy degree or that you got a degree from a fancy college or whatever the case is. I want you to have that education, because the fact that you were able to be successful in that process tells me something about your character and your staying power. But at the end of the day, what I want to know is, what can you do? Show me that you can do it, right? So the experiential learning thing, which is a huge passion for me right now, is something, the way that I'm implementing it is so that our students who graduate can actually come out and participate in an interview successfully. Right? Because a lot of times students go back to school to retool themselves, to rebrand themselves, to make a career change if they're doing that. They want to do something different. And what happens? Every interview question leads with, well, tell me about a time when you... And what happens? Well, I got an A in my accounting class. That's not very convincing as an employer, right? But now, as a student, you can say, well, my mentor hooked me up with this experiential project, and I actually set up the accounting system for this nonprofit. Have you heard of them? Let me tell you about this organization, but let me tell you about the work that I did in order to make that happen. And as an educator, I'm able to use that experience to measure the objectives that I need to cover in a particular class. Does that meet the objectives of an accounting 280 class? Probably does, right? Much more so than writing a paper on Southwest Airlines or Starbucks or Walmart or something. Plus, back to Tony's original question, it sure makes it a lot more enjoyable for me as the instructor to be able to teach all these different individuals on all their personal passions and their individual projects that they're working on in order to show me that they have the aptitude that I need to be able to pass them on to the next class. You want to add?
Yeah. I think what I really like to just point, linking mentorship and leadership, and I struggle with the technology piece sometimes too, and the field of psychology does, because it feels like there's a connection. So I hear a little bit of what you're saying is how do we stay connected as a leader and a mentor with all this technology, and I think it can be a challenge, but it can be an asset. I think it boils down to the integrity of the leader and the mentor. So we're in, like, the times are changing, right? And they're changing quickly. So there's all this cool stuff to help us connect. But if you maintain your integrity as a mentor and use your skills to stay connected, whether it's Skype or text or email or in person, I think the constant is your integrity and what you're putting out there and how you're connecting.
Jennifer, real quick, before you end that mic real quick, I guess one of the questions that we've all had that we've studied and stuff is when we're looking at the process of education, whether it would be my son that's young and innovative and is all into technology versus maybe the military person that's been in the military for 18, 20 some odd years and he's got into that technology. What have we learned in a nutshell about how people, when we mentor them, are accepting that mentorship back? What's important there? Does that kind of make sense? What have we learned that technology, in other words, the young person that's never done an interview that we're trying to teach them how to do an interview to be successful in getting a job, versus we've done all of this technology and they've learned everything online, and that's a good thing, but now have they still lost the interviewing skill?
I think interviewing is a huge one. That's probably the greater issue than face-to-face. But again, I would say, for me, as a leader, I have to say, am I relevant or irrelevant? So my style is based on the changing times. So, for example, the other night, Andrew and I we were going to have a Google Hangout with the guy at Google, but the guy at Google couldn't get his Google Hangout to work. So he and I were on Google Hangout, and he joined via the phone, It was kind of funny, I thought, to me, because I was figuring the Googler would be really into that Google Hangout. But the face-to-face is one thing, but the problem with it is it's a disconnect. If I start hammering Gen Y, this is what typically happens. Gen Y is every time, you don't have any people skills, you don't have this, you don't have, and again, I'm talking what's wrong with them rather than what's right with them. So how I focus it on person skills to start to meet with people is, imagine if you were able to connect in person with people in the workplace to share with them the great things that you have to offer. So if I come at them where there's a big gap because to be honest with you, it's just an issue. My mom is 82 years old and is on her iPad and never thought she'd be doing that. Now she's so onto Facebook, she's all into that. That's where it's moving for everybody. And some people are hanging on to the past, and to be honest with you, if you're forward thinking, you have to be able to adapt and change. One of those adaptations is to know that face-to-face communication is very different than what it used to be. It's global. I just the other day had a Skype conference call from somebody in Europe. That's just how it is. And so I don't necessarily see it as a barrier as much as baby boomers that have a difficult time with it see it. For example, in the workplace, many companies now do interviews over the phone. In fact, most companies screen, probably the first 2 or 3 interviews are all a phone call now. That never used to be. Now, they're waiting until they really think they want this person, and then they say, here's a panel interview. So it's relevant in the classroom, for example. Now I say, okay, hiring process, phone interview, knock that out. Now, how do you handle a panel interview? But there's relevance to the people because they see not just what they have to know, I have to show them why you have to know this. If I can't convince them of the why, the what is completely irrelevant, if that makes sense. Other questions for anybody? Yes.
So I have a question for you, Kevin, primarily about mentoring again. So I'm a big proponent of being a mentor, and I agree with you that you learn from your mentees. However, I'm wondering what your thought is about when you should start mentoring someone, because creativity is a big issue that you're pushing, and I have seen that there could be a risk of diminishing someone's creativity if you come on strong as a mentor too early, because think about having a chance to establish really who they are, their own purpose yet. And it's so easy to think that this man or this woman knows so much that I basically just want to emulate. And it almost can take on like a cult of personality type of effect. So I'm wondering what the thoughts are on that.
It's funny that you asked that because I experienced that on my Google Hangout call. So, give you an example. My principle is this. First of all, I don't do any formal mentoring. It's all informal. Formal mentoring to me is too clinical. It's kind of like you go to a counselor. No offense. Timer goes off. Beep. All right. Thank you very much. It has that feeling. So for me, it's informal, and I'm always really big on telling someone, I am not going to make decisions for you. I'm not going to decide, what do you think I should do? What do you think you should do? Let's walk through it. So in this particular case, Andrew says, I really want to help people. And right away, Trevor goes, join the Peace Corps. Okay, and he starts throwing out all these things. And I'm just like, no, because it goes against everything of what you're talking about. And I think that comes from maturity. The problem is some people mentor others to create many themselves. And you can't do that. Mentoring is the ability to just influence people. And the first ground rule, at least for me, is I'm just there to be a coach and a cheerleader for you. I believe in you. I think you got great things. I'd love to see that come alive. You tell me how I can be a resource. So how it's evidenced in here, for example, Jeremiah and Calvin didn't know each other until today. Both of them have been striving for similar things in the hearts that they have for military integration. So I go, hey, you guys should meet. There you go. That's mentorship. So to me, I see mentorship as operationalized, very, very efficient, very, very meaningful as far as there's outcomes from it. Cassie, Courtney, connecting people so that they're passionate, but then someone starts seeing that what they have going on in their life is relevant, because oftentimes mentoring really needs to be helping someone realize that there's something great about them that they don't think may be that great. But there is huge danger in having a mentor. And that's why I tell people, don't let your boss be your mentor. That's the worst thing, because then they have an inherent desire to please you because you're the one that gives them the pay raise at the end of the year. So you're prone to start doing whatever the boss tells you. And the same thing with parents. I was on a Vietnamese TV show not too long ago. We talked about this because there's a huge issue where parents start telling their kids what you're going to do. So here's what you're going to be, either an attorney or you be a doctor. There's no option here. And then all of a sudden, that person drops out of medical school because they really didn't have a passion for it. They really wanted to be an artist. But the family's concerned about the financial stability of being an artist. And so you have all that. And the parents mean well. They're not doing, you have to look at intent. I always tell people, your parents mean well, they love you. But the parents have to understand what's going to happen when you're no longer here. So yeah, so that is a big issue. And so that's why I'm careful on the whole mentoring thing. But the other thing I always do is when I mentor someone, one of the first things is, as soon as they start telling me about somebody special in their life, like in Andrew's case, it's his brother Alex, right away I'm telling him what you should do it for him. So you're always like constant passing on that multi-level mentoring strategy kind of thing. Because then now Andrew's going to have to be an example for Alex, because if he starts telling him things, he's going to walk that talk. That's tough. And the same thing for me, it keeps me accountable if I'm telling somebody something. If I'm telling employees we need to engage you, I want to engage them. You know what I mean? Does that make sense, or does that answer?
It does help, yeah.
But it is a challenge, and you have to check yourself, because, I used to fall into it a lot, and now I'm really, really careful on it, because I had people say to me, yeah, I made this decision because years ago you told me this, and I don't even remember telling them that. It just, it made me concerned, because I'm like, I don't remember telling you that. And so now I'm like really cautious because of that.
Other faculty are very important, because they don't really, they're never going to teach you about that aspect.
Yeah.
Having 400 or 500 students, and you're coming to the office hours, and all of a sudden, you're basically, I mean, really, you're a therapist.
See, mine's real convenient. Mine are text messages and emails. And I'm in meetings bored out of my mind because I can't be mindful, and so I'm multitasking. Text me when all these meetings go on so I can do a couple things and not be disengaged.
You took the words out of my mouth. I think that it's a therapeutic relationship, and I think, yeah. Sometimes I think as leaders and mentors, we feel like it has to be top down and puppeteering, but you can be side by side or bolstering and supporting, and it's much like therapy where the therapist often says, what I'm hearing is like you're reflecting and you're mirroring back at the person what they may already know or what they already and they just want to support. So I think we feel pressure to like guide and help and maybe help people make decisions, but there's this art of like how to make a decision for themselves. And what I'm hearing is they're mirroring what they're saying, but they just need it organized for themselves. So yeah, it's kind of like therapy.
That's why I like simulations. Because you can simulate, you say, I want to do this, or I want to do that. Well, let's walk through this. So if you did this, let's walk through what happened. If you did this, let's walk through what happened, But it is funny, interesting, but I would say the number one thing to advise for mentors is don't mentor someone unless you first see them and see something great about them. Unless you didn't build on it. You see something, and you can't be afraid to tell someone, do you know that you're an amazing public speaker? Okay? Right? What does the whole class say about this guy? Well, so this guy, when he presents, it's just so natural and just, he does these little things that you're just like, wow. You have to call down on it and tell him. He may not know unless we tell him, Yeah, just real quick, any other questions that people that are missing? Just to anybody?
We have an open mic here.
Okay, I just want to make sure everybody gets it because I didn't know. Is that a hand? Oh, Ryan, go ahead. I'm just kidding. He is scratching.
She has a question.
Okay.
My question is actually for all three of you. When you're in an organization which is experiencing explosive growth, how do you, for Jennifer, would you recommend to implement a mindfulness program for a team? And as far as the education standpoint, how do you prepare your students to prepare for that particular environment and how they can manage it as new employees? And then as a leader, how do you continue to keep your staff and your team engaged when you're going through, when it feels like you're just constantly putting out fires instead of just managing the chaos and growing with it?
What I'm seeing with the mindfulness.
Do we have any bigger questions?
So I'll just maybe together. What I'm seeing in the mindfulness, when organizations are implementing mindfulness, they're making it structured. I mentioned, giving a 20-minute break, so it can be informal like that. Permission to give your employees a mindful lunch break or a mindful afternoon relaxation break. Many of the organizations, especially the healthcare organizations, are doing 8-week structured programs where it's built into the workday. They're online, so they're very accessible. So there are people who implement these who go out into organizations and do them. You can hire someone like me to come once a week, come once a day, come during the lunch break and say, this is what we're going to do for the next 8 weeks. These are our goals. So a little bit more structured, but I think a lot of it is permission from the organization that this is okay, we want this, and we know we value it, and we know that it's going to improve all of our well-being and workplace setting. So I think those are my two suggestions: are to encourage informal practices like taking lunch or having a coffee room that's like a welcoming place, and then and then maybe bringing someone in to do a structured, organized 8 weeks, 1 hour a day, or, after work, or, that kind of thing. Hopefully that answered my portion of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jennifer makes a good point about creating the structure and those kinds of things. I think the challenge is that kind of the mindfulness approach is really relatively new in the workplace. I mean, it's been around for a while, but it's really starting to gain some traction in the corporate setting. So just like any other type of change, you have to introduce it properly, and you have to get buy-in. And you have to get buy-in. So if you're trying to implement a program in a corporate organization, you have to get buy-in at the top first, right? Because without executive leadership support, we can't hope that the mid-level staff or the entry-level staff are going to not only embrace it, but participate in it. And Kevin had referenced Dan Pink in his portion of the talk, and I highly encourage people to go out there and find his information. He also gives a great anecdotal story about a company called Atlassian, and how effective they are at building corporate culture. And one of the ways that they did that is they created a day within the work week where employees got to work on whatever they wanted to work on. Right? We've all heard this story before, Google and some of these other tech companies, but he gives a very specific example of how this company utilized this and let employees work on whatever they wanted to work on. It could be a personal project. It could be something not related to work whatsoever. And ultimately what they ended up doing was producing tremendous amounts of insight and success for the organization, fixes to problems and things like that. And they built a culture around that. So if you're building a culture around mindfulness practices and how do you create balance within your organization, you have to start with that. Peter Drucker always said that corporate culture eats strategy for breakfast. So we talk about what's the strategy to implement, but you have to really start with the culture, right? And then in education, I'm actually hoping to learn what I can and start from the mindfulness aspect and how might we be able to incorporate it into education in a more seamless and process-driven way. And when we originally set up this talk, working with the doctoral students, I know from personal experience the stress level that goes into being a doctoral student. Well, there's the same amount of stress level as being a first-time student. And really being able to kind of incorporate some of that mindfulness into the education process to help me get over those hurdles, to help me push through the 50th revision of my dissertation, or whatever the case happens to be, so that you can continue on that. So I see a lot of positive benefits to that. I know the healthcare industry can talk about cost savings for healthcare industry and improved health overall and things of that nature. I'm not certainly qualified to spout all those quotes, but.
Thank you.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
You don't have to have a degree in mindfulness to practice it or teach it to other people. So you guys got a tidbit today. Show up at work on Monday and say, so this is coming from what I was reading about that congressman who's trying to get Congress to meditate and having a really hard time, and he's got a lot of perseverance. So he says, why don't we stop and take a deep breath before we start this meeting? Like, everybody close their eyes and breathe. And I think he gets a lot of, people ignore him and roll their eyes and they don't participate, but he's persevering and trying to change the culture. And so anybody can really say, I have an idea, let's all put our phones down for a second and just do whatever you think feels good for your group. Turn to the next person and say, hello, how are you this morning? A warm greeting, or closing your eyes and taking a deep breath. And dig into the resources, there's a lot out there, and become that person in the organization that makes the change, the tiny, tiny little culture shift to make it happen.
We have to move on. Kevin's ADHD is
Try to be mindful.
Other questions?
Yes, sir.
I know, I went on a date.
This question is for all three of you. From your experiences, we talked a lot about faculty investment, faculty engagement. We know for our young citizens' education, it's faculty, parents, students themselves. You see a lot of investment from corporations and from political leaders. There's things on the news, taking cuts in education. Watching news this morning talking about outsourcing once again from kids don't meet the education requirements. We've seen more involvement from different corporations or taking kind of a role in system out.
I'll take that. I know you're an education guy, but you just wrote this for the next like 45 minutes. So, now, it's interesting you say that. The problem with education purely, in my opinion, is, especially like high school, just K through 12 really, is they're not outcome driven. And that comes from the heavy unionization. It's not student-centric at all. It's kind of like healthcare. Healthcare has never been patient-centric. It's physician-centric. We're trying to move to patient-centric. So it's not until education truly becomes student-centric that they really start understanding that issue and that schools should only measure on what are they putting out, period. So what I see happen, both I know Sharp, Scripps, I know Google does this, most of them are starting their own charter schools and actually saying, you know what, because to be quite frank with you, and anyone that teaches college in this room will tell you, it's stunning to see from papers to different things. You're not mad at the student, you know that they were not equipped with the education that they received, which is really sad. But it's something that you have really good teachers out there that try, but the system is not designed for innovation. It's designed of what's in it for me as a teacher. And I know friends and teachers don't like hearing that, but that's what I see. Because, for example, look at bullying, look at all the cases of bullying, and everybody says, oh, well, the teachers all do it, we all do. Nothing's done about it. I know in my own case, to tell my mom that I'm not college material, period, it's never be shit saying stuff like that. School should be a time of inspiring people to greatness and supporting that and teaching in different styles so you don't have to deal with the ADHD issues because you're engaging me instead of turning on and having me watch a movie or, just doing things that are completely disengaging. So I think education has failed drastically. And I think the colleges are picking it up mostly in the for-profit and non-profit other schools because they don't have a choice because no one's going to go there if you don't have an innovative program. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, I've actually done a lot of research on this, especially in the public school education, which I would not going to stand up here and claim that I have a fix or even the slightest approach starting to fix that. But we're starting to see a huge shift in the trend, what they're referring to as progressive education. So it's an alternative type of modality for delivering education, and sometimes it's referred to as hack schooling. Okay, there's a fantastic YouTube video out there if you just type in hack schooling. There's a young 14-year-old kid, 13, 14-year-old kid that shares his experience of how he creates his own content, what he wants to learn for the day and how he goes about getting the information and how he's applying the knowledge on a day-to-day basis outside of a traditional classroom type of fix. If you really want to know what's broke with the public education system, watch a documentary called Waiting for Superman. It kind of makes you sick to your stomach a little bit. But it needs to be fixed in order to, when we're looking at students as they come into the education system, kind of then rolling it past the college level and what does it look like for corporations. You're seeing a big shift right now in larger corporations to bring education in-house for their employees. So you're starting to see a lot bigger shift in the trend of chief learning officer. A lot of organizations are bringing on board a chief learning officer. Sometimes tends to come from an HR-related background, but not necessarily. And they're looking for these individuals to help develop programs specifically to train the employees within that organization that's directly relevant to the type of work and the type of skill set that employer needs, because they can't wait for the students to go to a four-year school and take 5 or 6 years to get it done and then really not be trained at the level that corporation wants on a specific skill set that directly translates into job performance there. So they're seeing a lot of that. There's some partnerships going on with colleges and things like that directly with some of the very large employers to help customize the curriculum for those individuals. But there has to be a shift, and again, it really ties back to being able to be engaged, right? I mean, if you're not engaged in any process, you're not going to be good at it. Whatever it is, whether it's education or whether it's job performance or whatever the case is. So you have to be able to actively be a participant in the process. And if it's not delivered in a way that's interesting and intriguing to you, you're not going to be effective in any way.
share with you.
Furthermore, any other final questions? All right. Well, we want to just thank you all for being here, and hopefully you gained some insight. Mike, you want to share some of that part?
Yeah, just another 22 minutes, sir. Again, I'll let Kevin finish his thank yous. And I personally want to thank each and every one of you for coming out. I know this is probably not the top place for you to be on Saturday, after working a long work week and all the different things that you have working on. But thank you very much for being out here. Spend some time after we break session here and talk to the folks from IDEA, talk to Dr. Mustafa from SAM, learn a little bit more about those organizations. Look at some of the materials we have in the back for you. Again, the notes and things like that from the presentations are there. So interact and engage with the materials, and we'll be around to answer some individual personal questions as well.
Dr. Mustafa has an awesome sense of humor, so hopefully to hear some of that from him. Real quick show of hands, how many of you in the future would prefer like a Saturday morning or would prefer a night during the week, like 6 o'clock at night? Say 6 o'clock at night during the week, raise your hand. Okay, Saturday morning as it was. That was hard, we're going to have to do both. So, yes?
I think most of the people would have come Saturday morning out here.
Just that critical thinking there. That's awesome right there. Oh my God. Oh, thank you. So we'll send things out to some future events, and then feel free to email me on specific topics that you would like to have in the future. And we'll kind of keep continuing on and then getting different speakers. On May 30th, we're having our Power Mentor annual breakfast. I wasn't there, so we breakfast on a Saturday morning for those people that aren't here. Make sure that you try to attend. People that aren't here, make sure you try to attend. But anyway, that will be the keynote for that will be Chris Van Gorder, who's the chief experience, chief executive officer, president of Scripps. And he's got a book that he put out, Frontline Leader, so he'll be talking about that. So if you're interested in that, let me know. But otherwise, give us topics, and thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your day. And the biggest thing is, if you leave here and there's no changes, then you've done nothing. So really, apply things to your life and look at what are different things. Ask people, hey, what's your perspective on my leadership or my abilities for this or that? And then also seek out to mentor people, because the best thing you really don't want to do is impact other people's lives around. So with that, thank you very much, and you all have a great day.